Hello, yes to birthers. This is Rachel Yellen, and we are back today. And I have been so excited to do this interview because we are here with Jane Austen, and Jane always makes me laugh. And so, right as we're getting ready to do the interview, we start like fussing with our blouses and our tank tops, and we're like, we just got to make sure that nothing's like in the wrong place. And so, Jane is.
Sounds right.
It's exactly right. So I'm so glad you're here, and it's super fun that we get to do this in person. Jane is the founder and director of Mama Tree Yoga, prenatal yoga school. And Jane has been doing birth work in a variety of ways since 1990. Jane trained as a midwife. She trained as a doula, a childbirth educator, obviously yoga. And she teaches in several different prenatal yoga teacher training programs. She offers prenatal partners yoga workshops online and in person. She has a prenatal yoga DVD. She teaches incredible retreats on pelvic floor health. She is one of the funniest, most charismatic people that I know. I know. I mean, and the other thing is that I wanted to tell all of you is that one of the reasons why I asked Jane to be here is I get very emotional. When I became a doula in so I was 30 years old, so whenever that was, I called Jane and I was like, can I come to your prenatal yoga class? She's like, yeah, of course, just come to my yoga class. And I went to her class, and first of all, she totally welcomed me and introduced me as a doula as if I was like really experienced. And that was the start of my doula career, and I really wouldn't have been able to do it without you.
I know, I sent everybody to you.
You did. You did. She saw that thing. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I knew you'd be good at it. You were great at it, and feedback was always amazing, so it was easy win-win.
So, Jane has we've known each other for now 15 years, and we look younger and prettier now than we did back then. And one of the things that was so inspiring to me about your teaching, Jane, was the way in which you connect with your students. And Jane has a way of being with her students where everybody feels like they're special, like them. And her classes are fun and funny. And one of the things that we have in common is we're a little naughty, we're a little inappropriate,
slightly irreverent.
Yeah, slightly, exactly,
a little surly.
Yeah, a little swearing here and there, and we both have that. So
not too much woo-woo, but just enough.
Just enough woo to we get the normal people in the room, and then we give them a little dose
just here, a little dose, homeopathic.
So I asked Jane to be here today because she is, been of course doing this work for 20
plus
many years, and so I could just sort of hand it over to you and say, what do you want to tell everybody that's going to help them have a healthier, less painful, satisfying, empowering birth? But I want to start specifically with you helping us understand, how is prenatal yoga different from regular yoga, and what do we do in prenatal yoga that sets people up for a better birth experience?
Yes, great. Thank you. That's a really good question. And I actually get that question all the time. So I would say, many people will come up to me and say, I'm pregnant. What shouldn't I do in the yoga class? And I hate starting there. I hate starting with the shouldn't list. And so my question always to women is, well, what feels right to you right now, like today in this moment? So one of the great benefits that we get from the yoga practice is that we have the opportunity to really sit in the present and pay attention and notice. And we always say that the yoga practice begins with listening, and it makes the unconscious conscious. So if you do that, if you make that which is sort of unconscious in your day and in your life conscious, it gives you a specific opportunity to really assess what's appropriate for you. So I don't say, oh, well, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. I don't really do that. What I ask women is, well, how does that feel? How does this feel? And I always answer a question with another question, because one of the main tenets of yoga, it's called Swadhyaya, and that means self-inquiry. And what I love about yoga is that it gives you a space to do that. And when you're pregnant, you've got so many things shifting and changing in your life, to have the opportunity to tune in, to listen, to pay attention, then you might be surprised with what you discover about yourself, that gets lost in the like Googling, group beta strep, or Googling whatever, gestational diabetes, and, educate yourself for sure, of course. But what happens when women get pregnant is they turn outward, even like high-powered women who like are running companies, like they get pregnant and then they look to somebody else for all the answers. And what I love about the yoga practice is that it gives you the opportunity to turn it in, like turn it in, sister, what's true for you. And then from that place, like I have profound trust in women that they will make decisions and choices that are appropriate to them. I don't have an agenda about how they should birth, who they should birth with, where they should birth. I just don't have an agenda about that. It doesn't make sense to me to put that on women, right? Do I want to educate them? Of course. Do I want them to know what their choices are? Of course. So the yoga practice, particularly when you're pregnant, lets you turn in and really listen. And when you're listening, it is my great, profound trust that women will make decisions and choices that are appropriate for them.
Awesome. So you're totally pointing, of course, to what creates the empowering experience. And the highlight, of course, is to focus inward.
Yeah.
So when you are, 2 weeks pregnant,
Yeah.
right? There's no such thing really as 2 weeks.
Right.
So
well, you get extra credit.
Yeah.
You get extra credit for those 2 weeks.
Exactly.
You are not pregnant.
Exactly.
But let's say after you piss on a stick.
Right. After you piss on a stick, some women are going to be really comfortable still laying on their stomach.
Yeah.
Other women are going to be
Abdomen.
really,
Yeah.
On their abdomen. Other women are going to be, look at that, right there.
Well, people will say, "Oh, the baby's in the stomach." It's like, baby is not in your stomach. It's
No,
very
we definitely don't
inhospitable.
Totally. So some women are going to be comfortable, right, having laying on their belly,
Sure.
their belly, and other women are not. Some women at 26 weeks of pregnancy are really not. They don't breathe well laying on their back, and other women, they're like 34 weeks, 35 weeks laying on their back. They're like, "Am I crushing my baby? Is this okay?" So I love that you're pointing to that, and I really want that to be a takeaway for all of the the pregnant women that are listening, but also for the birth workers. How important that is to direct the knowing back to the mom.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. As a midwife and as a doula, it's so important to kind of reflect back on women that they know a lot. They think they don't know anything, but they've been inside their own skin for their whole lives, and they're like really the expert on their baby, like they're with their baby all the time. So just reflect that back on them if you work with pregnant women, so that she can begin to kind of trust herself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you do? I feel like I could answer this for you, but like, because I so many students that take your classes, that what are some of the things that you consistently teach in your classes that you feel like these are like your kind of signature things that you teach that help women really prepare for the sensations of labor and relax into it or power into it? What are some? Can you give a
couple of nuggets?
You
want some little nuggets?
Yes.
Well, certainly cultivating a relationship to your breath, because what we know is that a deep breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and a woman can drop into relaxation. So that is essential. But that said, so like creating practices that link her to her breath. So that said, those practices have to be a little bit challenging in my perspective. So in yoga, we call it tapas. And the tapas is a practice that takes you outside of your comfort zone. So you practice deep breath, but you know what? It's pretty easy to deep breath when you're like in Queen's pose, which is fabu. Do it. I'm not saying don't do it. You got to create the neural pathways to get you there. But to do things that are physically challenging and then notice what's happening mentally, emotionally when you're doing something that's physically challenging. So I have practices that I call the tapas practices that we do in every prenatal class, which are awesome. And women come out feeling strong. Yeah.
1,000 times.
1,000 times.
1,000 times.
And it's funny when I first started doing that, the women did it for like, I don't know, we did it for 3-4 minutes max. We do the tapas practice. There's all different ones, so that's one of them. There's definitely different movements that we do to build up strength in the upper body so we can hold our babies because our babies want to be held, but also that take you to that place where you're like, man, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So then when you're at a place and you don't want to do this anymore, what do you do? Do you take a break? And you can take a break.
Yeah, but
Always.
there's no break in labor.
Yeah. Well, there is a break in labor.
But you can't decide in the middle of a
No,
surge,
true.
I'm done with this.
True, but I never want women to feel like the practice is a competition with themselves or anybody else. There's always that invitation. But the caveat with that is that that's when the practice begins. That's when you're in a place where you can cultivate a relationship to your breath. And what I love is I had a woman once tell me that she did that in labor. Like I was like, why? Why did you do that in labor? And she said she did it because she knew when she did that, she'd be able to find her breath because she'd done it before. Because she's done it before. So creating these neural pathways. So using different breath techniques, breathing in and out through the nose, breathing in through the nose, gently exhaling through the mouth. You know, I use a rose petal breath, which is amazing. Women like, you know, and I tell them to put a rose petal between these lips and those lips. So they're like, you're ready to have a baby. You're like blowing rose petals out of your cooch. And, you know, you do that, the chances are that you're going to have more than if you don't do that. The tissue is going to be responsive, you know, and the tissue is going to be able to soften and open. And that's what the whole deal is with preparation for childbirth, being able to soften, be able to let go. So childbirth, yes. So that's childbirth, but it's motherhood, man. Like all the tapa stuff, it's for motherhood because there are things that are outside of your control. And there are things that, like when you become a mom, you never, at least for me personally, never had I had the experience of things that are like, you know, things are out of your control always, right? There's always shit that goes down. But it's like just your life. But when you're a mom, it's not just your life, it's somebody else's life. So it brings this whole other level of weight and that's okay. I mean, that's part of the process. It makes us feel a little vulnerable, you know. The woman who says, "Oh, I'm not worried at all," I'm like, you should worry a little bit. And the reason is the woman that doesn't worry at all, she doesn't prepare for childbirth, for postpartum, for the challenges that can happen in the early months, you know, with her partner if she has one, in relationships to her family, like all of that stuff. So if she's like, I'm not worried, I'm like, wow, I think maybe you need to do a little work, you know? And it's not that I want women to be terrified, but I don't know, what do they call it? Like bypass, like the spiritual bypass. I don't know if that's what it is, but I don't even know what that is. But that idea that like, if a woman tells me she's worried, I say, well, what are you doing about that? And then she's like, oh, I don't know. Well, where are you when you feel safe or less worried? Like what's around you? Who's around you? What's the environment? So again, it gives her the opportunity to go into the inquiry as opposed to like reading a book, as opposed to even taking a class. I mean, Rachel and I teach great classes. Take our classes for sure. But like, let that be an opportunity to really figure out what your values are and what you need and want. And the truth is that when we do that, like the process has so much more ease to it, you know? Yeah. And I don't have the tip for like, oh, do this and you're gonna have an easy birth. Like, I don't know that tip. But what I do know is that if we stay in the inquiry, if we stay in compassion, then that's a place that we can potentially soften around. And then when we're soft, we open, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. So those, like, planting those seeds for women in the prenatal experience is really, really important. That, and don't grip your ass. Don't grip your ass.
That's perfect.
No ass gripping.
No ass gripping.
That's your mantra.
No ass gripping.
Like, women tell me all the time, they hear me in their labor saying, do not grip your ass.
That's right. That's right. Let it go. Let it go.
Let it go.
So speaking of ass gripping, but I want to like shift the awareness. So we've been talking a lot about, where it kind of to focus inward. I'm talking a little bit more about the mindset.
Yeah.
So if we take it down into the body and
yeah, let's take it down. Take the down elevator.
Take the down elevator.
Down elevator.
So let's talk about the pelvis and the pelvic floor and preparing. What is the pelvic floor? How do you prepare the pelvic floor?
Yeah, do you squeeze your piss hole?
Yeah.
Not so much.
So tell us about that, because people are like, what's the Kegel? Do I do it? Do I not do it?
People still talk about the Kegels a lot. And it's not that you don't do them. So it kind of depends on what's going on in your pelvic floor. But, and Rachel's been doing this work long enough, and I know I have, is that we were told to tell women to do 200 Kegels a day. And then what we found, and that was not really evidence-based, but the truth is, the reason it wasn't evidence-based is because there was no research about it at all. And it's only in the last, 10, 15 years that there's really been even a field of, yoga. I mean, yoga is really embracing the pelvic floor, which is great, and pelvic floor awareness and looking at high tone and low tone in those muscles. So if you think of the pelvic floor in terms of the bony structure of the pelvis, and some people say a hammock, and I'm like, do not visualize your pelvic floor like a hammock, okay? Start there, no hammock, right? That is a pelvic floor in extreme dysfunction. Like a hammock, like what's a hammock? Hammock is like your pelvic floor at your knees. Think of your pelvic floor like a trampoline that is responsive. So it's basically a group of muscles and connective tissue at the front of the pelvis, at the pubic bone in the front, sit bones on the side, and at the coccyx in the back. So those are the main bony landmarks of the pelvic outlet. So what we do in the prenatal practice is that we take the pelvic floor in movements, because of the movement of the pelvis, into like its full range, moving the pelvis into a forward tilt, moving the pelvis into a backward tilt. And what we're doing, because the mobility that happens in all the connective tissue in the pelvis when a woman's pregnant, there is more movement in the bony structure when she's pregnant than any other time in her life. So when she takes the pelvis into a forward tilt, the muscle fibers are lengthening this way and this way, right? And expanding out from the orifices, right? Urethra, vaginal opening, and the anus, okay? So think of it that way. And then when you bring the pelvis into a forward tilt, and I like to bring it into a squat in a forward tilt, because you're actually gonna load those muscles too, and really get that visual of those muscles expanding, expanding, expanding. Now, when you bring it into a tuck, there's a little bit of activation and lift that can happen. But for the pregnant women, we really focus on the release. Like with the postnatal women, I'm like, pull it in and up, sister. Whereas with the prenatal women, it's all like, bring it down. In yoga, the energy is called apana. And there's nothing more apana than you will ever do than give birth to a baby. So it's that downward moving energy, right? It's an elimination process. It's releasing that baby through your body. And if you can kind of tap into that sort of downward flow, we use breath for that too.
But how do women know if they, the whole concept of strengthen or soften?
Right.
How do you know if you need to strengthen or you need to soften?
Well, so it can get a little complex, but one of the things that, and this kind of brings us to the ass gripping. So if you know that you have a tendency to kind of grip in your muscles, it's likely that you are creating what we call a hypervigilant pelvic floor. So a pelvic floor that is a hard time releasing. And because the glutes, you think about the glute med on the sides, glute max in the back, like your butt muscles, those muscles are definitely impact the pelvic floor. We call them the friends of the pelvic floor. So the hamstrings, call those the friends of the pelvic floor. The muscles of the inner thighs, friends of the pelvic floor. So if a woman knows that she's got really, really tight inner thigh muscles, actually this pulls the partner in if she has one, we'll sometimes have them do really, really gentle massage in the pelvic floor, not the pelvic floor specifically, that's another thing we can talk about, but in the inner thigh muscles. So it's really just like a gentle pressing in and then kind of rolling with the hands kind of together, kind of rolling. So I teach partners how to touch women in a way, hopefully they know how to touch her in a way that feels good, but in particular during the labor and the birth, or even just leading up to the labor and the birth.
So are these things that in your prenatal partner practice online class that the partners can learn how to do?
Absolutely.
Okay. So just tell us a little bit about that, because that class is so special.
Yeah.
It is so special. It's so special.
I
don't know how else to say it. People
super
I love that
sweet.
class. Yeah. And Jane teaches it in person in San Francisco, but she also has an online class.
I do have an online version of it. Yes. So basically, like culturally speaking, historically, not everybody has a male partner, of course, but historically speaking, the dudes were not allowed in the labor rooms, right? We went to the red tent. We went off to the maternity ward or wherever, culturally, wherever, historically, wherever, but the men weren't invited. So what happens now is that not only are they invited, they're expected to be helpful. And there's so few ways for them to have a context of figuring out how to help women. So Rachel teaches classes. I've been teaching childbirth prep classes since, I don't know, the early 90s, long time. But this workshop in particular, we use the tools of yoga. So using the asana practice, using supported postures, using breath work, using deep relaxation, but also using touch. I mean, one thing that I teach my partners before they put their hands on her is to bring some awareness to their own body. Right?
Don't smack into
them. Find your breath, right? Just find your breath. I even tell them, rub your hands together. Rub your hands together. Feel the tips of your fingers. So you have some awareness of your hands, and then you touch, right? And then it's not like in labor you have to be like, ugh. But just like psychically, before you put if you don't want to like do this, although I have had people come back to me and say, oh, did you do Jane's workshop? Because the partners are like, yeah. So cute. But having some awareness of like their own bodies and their own sort of stress has a huge impact on her.
So what would the partners, by doing that workshop, what will they walk away with? A clear knowing. If you were like, you're going to walk away with,
well,
what's that?
From my perspective, I feel like they have the opportunity to walk away with knowing that they have something to offer her in birth. And if that is just to hold the space so that she feels safe, to hold her hand so she doesn't feel alone, to love her, I love what the midwives say, that the opposite of fear is not courage, it's love, and a birth devoid of love just feels so tragic and traumatic. And regardless, like, you know what, you can love that baby out of your body if you were lying on an operating table. I have every faith in the world that absolutely is true, but you have to like cultivate that and know that is such an important piece of birth. And we don't know that. We don't know that. Right. So I think they walk away with feeling more confident that they have something to offer, but also that I don't know, depending on how long they've been in a relationship, they know her. I probably know her better than anybody, and probably most. Maybe anybody, but probably most. And that's something. Especially if a woman is choosing a birth environment where she doesn't know anybody, like that she doesn't know the care providers that are going to be there. The partner plays such a huge role in holding that space of love, that space of just being present for her. Because you know what, your L&D nurse is in and out, your doc's in and out. You know who's there? You, the partner.
Totally.
Yeah.
And other people that are involved in births.
Yeah.
We have people, lots of people listening here who might be
doulas, midwives, childbirth educators.
I want to share with all of you that, Jane teaches, teaches prenatal yoga teacher training programs. And the people who take her teacher training programs are not all becoming yoga teachers.
Yeah.
They are doing a lot of, there are a lot of other kinds of providers who know that the prenatal teacher training is going to help them do the work that they do.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your teacher training programs and how a whole variety of people would benefit from what's in that training to taking it into whatever their work is, whether they're an acupuncturist, they're a chiropractor, they're a nurse, they are a nanny, that whole gamut.
Yeah. Cool. That's a great question because I have people ask me all the time. So I have an upcoming work training in October, and so far I have 3 doulas and that aren't yoga teachers. You do have to have a yoga practice or some kind of foundation in yoga because that's the tools that we're using to help women. So that's beneficial for you to have that at least, I say like a 3-year background in yoga, kind of minimally. But really for doulas, for anybody like Rachel was saying who works in the field, it's really beneficial because the practices that are taught are simple, super simple, like something I call juicy hips, where it's kind of like a one-sided squat. You're in hands and knees, you take one leg out to the side and you roll the hips out. And that's a great way to get good blood flow into the pelvis. And that's something that a doula can show a mama, It's something a midwife, if she knows the baby's head is like crooked, you can and midwives have all kinds of tricks, but like the juicy hips is great. Or if the baby's in a posterior position, doing like a flow cat, or getting into hands and knees and doing your cat stretches, like some of those things that like we do every single prenatal class, and you can kind of use them with your clients or use them with your sister, your mother, your cousin, your friend. So yeah, it's a very comprehensive program. I've been running a school specifically since, when did I start the school? 2006 is when I did my first full prenatal yoga teacher training. And I've been doing it ever since. I do it twice a year in San Francisco. So that's like, I love that. It's so fun. The women that come into that circle, it's just powerful. So it's usually 25, periodically it'll bump up 35, something like that. But it's like a relatively smaller training if you look at some of these big giant trainings. I was just in China, man, talk about big trainings. Everything in China is big.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like it was crazy. Starting yoga festivals, all kinds of stuff, crazy, thousands of people, crazy.
So I think one of the things that's so important to know about your trainings is that that people are learning all about childbirth in the training. It's a lot of childbirth education. If you're not a childbirth professional, but you're into yoga and you want to teach prenatal yoga, you're going to learn all about the processes of giving birth and what goes on mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really important. And I tell women if they want to be prenatal yoga teachers, I think it's a good niche. If they're not interested in learning and understanding about childbirth, then they should be a prenatal teacher.
Right, because anybody can not teach a deep twist.
Yeah, anybody could modify an inversion, you know what I mean? Or, whatever, tell her not to lie on her belly. So, so it's, you definitely have to have a certain curiosity in the childbirth process. And, I will say that the trainings can be really intense for people, depending on your own relationship to birth, to motherhood, to mothering, your own mother, being undermothered, losing a mother, whatever, it's intense. And that's what makes it so fertile and good. I mean, it's such an amazing training. And I'm just developing a pelvic floor teacher training too. So that is my next baby. It's like baby number 2. Baby number 1 is amazing, and I love that baby, but I am growing another baby, and I'm just putting all the stuff that I've been doing for decades around pelvic floor health and making it a little bit more in the spectrum of a woman's life. So for myself, being a menopausal woman, having a little bit more insight about my own personal experience, working with women in that particular demographic is really giving me insight and research, of course, to kind of the whole spectrum. So the pelvic floor teacher training is really about women's bodies through our whole lives, you know, because the truth is, like, you know, men's bodies, like, they get to maturity and then they start to age, right? Our bodies are always changing. We change every single month, you know? So to like really look at like what's happening hormonally in a woman's body, how pelvic floor function is affected by emotions, by how pelvic floor function is affected by how she holds her body, how she is in the world, you know, how she holds or doesn't hold fear in her body. So it's really deep, it's intense, it's beautiful. So I do women's retreats that are just like for everybody. If you just want to like do like spa retreat, little pelvic floor awareness, that's great. I'm working with 1440 in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California. Amazing locale. So I'm doing workshops there. You can find everything on my website, janeaustinyoga.com. But also look for the pelvic floor teacher training. It's being developed right now.
So awesome. I highly encourage you to check out the website and
Super
get
fun.
her newsletter and all
Super
that.
fun. Yeah.
So I want to like drop it in on a personal note, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So I don't think I mentioned that Jane is the mother of two beautiful children. Well, they're not children.
Oh
but
my God.
Teen and almost adult.
I have an adult. I have a 21-year-old daughter.
21?
Clover turned 21. Clover turned 21 this year, and then Leo's gonna be 18 in a couple of weeks. So yeah.
So
what are your questions, dear?
So
what do you want to know?
So I want you to share with our yes to birthers, when you, in terms of like, there's the personal experience of birthing your children.
Yeah.
Right. You birth your children at the very beginning, before you're almost like at the beginning of your career.
Right.
Right. And if you could look back at yourself before you birthed your children, knowing what you know now.
Yeah.
And you came up to young Jane and you were like, young Jane, Mama Jane, pre-mother Jane. And you were to give yourself like the nugget, you know, the pearl. Right? You could be that mama love, right, for yourself, the teacher for yourself, the supporter for yourself. What would you say to yourself before, you know, as you were preparing to birth your children?
You know, I think that's a really good question. You know, I would really, encourage for pregnant women, but I know one of the things that I did in preparation for my own birth were really making sure that I was surrounded by people that I loved and loved me. You know, I knew for myself that was going to be really important, you know, because I knew that that would make me feel safe. So, you know, I think it's really important for women to choose a birth environment where they feel safe, you know, and I did that. So I appreciate that. The other thing is, you know, being in an environment where you're respected, where the decisions and choices that you make are going to be honored. And that's so essential, right? So that you feel safe and you feel honored. And then just to be reminded that being connected to yourself, and being reminded that when you birth, you don't do it alone. There's actually somebody else involved. Like there's people, they're there. They're like holding the safety, they're holding the love. But to be connected to yourself, but also be connected to your baby inside of you. You know, I feel like that is so important. And I remember my first birth, and there was a lot of chaos right around the birth of the baby, right around her birth. And I just knew that I wanted it to be quiet. And I hadn't thought about it before. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I want to birth in a quiet sanctuary. It was like, I am not a quiet person. I did not think about that. But, and the thing is, I think that I had the clarity because I had those things intact to know that I didn't want anybody to make any noise. That I just wanted it to be quiet. And I wanted to like hear her. And didn't want to hear someone say, it's a boy, it's a girl, wah, 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 you know, wah, wah, wah. Like I just, and that was honored. And that was honored in that birth. And it was one of the peak experiences of my life, is seeing my daughter and having her right here in front of me, and have the room was silent. And we just did this like, yeah.
It's like never gets old. Hearing a mom tell the exquisite moment that she remembers for the rest of her life, like it just, just like,
Yeah.
it just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we do what we do.
That's why we do.
Because it makes us cry.
Totally.
In the most beautiful
Yeah.
way. That's righteous. When women cry in labor, or in labor, yes, but in prenatal, like women cry in prenatal yoga all the time, like, and they might say sorry. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
That's like one of the most efficient ways to get rid of toxins.
Yes.
But it's also like a shedding and a let go and a letting, like softening, like all that happens when we cry. So, and like if a woman doesn't cry, I'm like, maybe I should pinch her. Maybe get a few tears going, lady.
So we're gonna wrap up.
Yeah.
If you could, like, just hone in, like the practice. The one thing, like the Jane takeaway, like just one thing.
How can I do one thing?
You're gonna have to. We're gonna have to have her narrow it down.
Yeah.
So narrow it down to one thing. Like what do you want women to come away with? Or every day they're like, right, Jane told me that I really need to do blah 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 to help me have the best possible experience and love my experience of birthing, no matter how the baby is born.
Yeah. Okay.
So just like look, tell them, just like get right in there and tell them.
Well, it would be to not be so hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself, and know that, like, this is such a rapid time of change, right? And there's not even words for it in our culture. Like everything about pregnancy from the medical perspective is about the baby. And I just really want you to be kind to yourself, to judge yourself a little bit less. And then from that place, we soften.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jane,
So fun. Love this lady.
Jane.
Yes to birth.
Jane teaches us to be a yes to birth with her charisma and compassion and kindness.
Enthusiasm,
for sure. No shortage of
Well, super fun to talk to Rachel.
Really fun
I'm
to be with you.
looking forward to seeing like what else that you're up to, and it's really, good work.
Thank you all for
Good
being
work.
here. We love that you're a yes to birth. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Ciao.
Okay, bye. I am so happy that you're a part of the Yes to Birth movement. Please visit yestobirth.com to learn more about my pregnancy, birth, and beyond audio relaxation program, my childbirth education and techniques programs, and my private counseling and coaching. Yes to Birth. I'm Rachel Yellen. Bye.